The Russian Empire had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their ships numbered in the tens of thousands. Conquered worlds spanned entire galaxies. They suppressed rebellions, obliterated civilizations, and exterminated species that dared to oppose them. Throughout this time, they had never known true fear. Supreme Admiral Vorotov sat in his command chair aboard the Imperial flagship, Eternal Dominion. Around him, the bridge buzzed with activity. Officers moved between stations, checking reports and monitoring the vast network of sensors tracking the Empire's borders. It was a normal, quiet day, like most others. The Empire faced no threats. A junior officer approached his chair and bowed low. "Lord Admiral, our border sensors have detected a vessel entering Imperial space. Classification unknown, sir. A single ship without an identification beacon. It does not respond to hails. Likely a smuggler, or perhaps a lost merchant who strayed from the safe lanes." Vorotov waved a hand dismissively. "Dispatch a squadron to intercept. Destroy them if they resist. Capture them if they do not. I want to know who is foolish enough to enter our space without permission." "Yes, Supreme Admiral." The officer hurried to carry out the order. Vorotov returned to his tactical display, already forgetting the unknown ship. Such things happened from time to time. Lost vessels, broken navigation systems, desperate criminals trying to escape justice. They were all handled the same way. The Empire did not tolerate intrusions. 12 warships of the 3rd Patrol Squadron broke formation from their positions along the border. Their commanders were battle-hardened veterans who had served the Empire for decades. They had destroyed pirates, crushed uprisings, and enforced imperial law in hundreds of systems. One unknown ship was nothing to them. The squadron commander, Colonel Tretiakov, stood on the bridge of his ship, the Iron Claw, and watched the sensor readings. The unknown vessel moved slowly through Imperial space, not trying to hide or flee. It was either very brave or very stupid. "Open a channel," Tretyakov ordered. "Give them one chance to surrender." The communications officer tinkered with his console. "Channel open, Commander. Unknown vessel, stand by. This is Colonel Tretyakov of the Russian Imperial Navy. You have entered Imperial space without permission. Shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded. In case of resistance, you will be destroyed. You have 1 minute to comply." They waited. A minute passed. The unknown vessel did not answer. It did not slow down. It simply continued its course, heading deeper into Imperial space. Tretyakov's eyes narrowed. "Scan that ship. I want to know everything about it." The sensor officer leaned over his console, running every available scanner. When he looked up, his face expressed bewilderment. "Commander, I am having trouble getting clear readings. The material is completely unusual. I cannot identify it. The ship appears heavily armed, but the weapon signatures do not match anything in our database. The size, the construction, it's roughly the class of a cruiser, but the design is not like anything I have seen. Almost familiar." The officer fell silent, checking the readings again. "Sir, this is impossible. The design patterns show similarities to Russian fleet ships." A cold silence fell over the bridge. All the officers turned to look at the sensor display. "Russian?" Tretyakov repeated. "That is impossible. The Russians were wiped out 200 years ago. Every colony burned. Every ship destroyed. Check your readings again." "I have checked them 3 times, Commander. The design elements are unmistakable. This ship is built according to Russian construction principles." Tretyakov stared at the sensor display for a long time. The unknown vessel continued its slow, confident advance. It showed no fear. It did not hesitate. It moved like a predator that knew it had nothing to fear from the prey around it. "This must be a ruse," Tretyakov finally said. "Some other species using captured Russian technology or copying their designs. No matter. All ships, intercept and fire without warning. Destroy that vessel." The 12 warships of the 3rd Patrol Squadron accelerated, heading toward the unknown vessel. Their weapons were charged and locked on target. They had overwhelming firepower. They had numerical superiority. They had 3,000 years of military experience. None of it mattered. The unknown vessel moved. One moment it was drifting slowly in space. The next, it was among them, moving faster than their sensors could track. Light flashed in the darkness of space. Energy beams of a color unseen by the Russians cut through their ships like knives through paper. The Iron Claw shuddered as something struck its shields. Lights flickered, sirens wailed. Tretyakov gripped his command chair as the ship swayed from another hit. "Report!" he shouted. "Shields at 40%. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. We have lost contact with the Thunderbolt and the Conqueror. On the sensor display, 2 of the squadron's ships simply vanished. Not damaged, not retreating, vanished. Where they had been, there were only expanding clouds of debris. Return fire. All ships, concentrate fire on the target. The remaining ships of the squadron opened fire with everything they had. Missiles streaked through space. Energy weapons glowed. Kinetic rounds rained down on the enemy ship. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The unknown ship did not even slow down. Its hull seemed to shift and flow, absorbing some weapons fire, reflecting others, passing through the barrage as if walking through rain. 3 more Russian ships perished in the next 10 seconds. "This is impossible," whispered the weapons officer. "Nothing can survive that kind of firepower." "Nothing," Tretyakov agreed, watching the sensor display with growing horror. The unknown vessel was not just fighting them, it was playing with them. It could have destroyed them all in the first few seconds. Instead, it was dismantling them piece by piece, almost methodically. "Send a message to command," Tretyakov ordered. "Emergency priority. Tell them." He never finished the sentence. The iron claw shuddered one last time as something tore through its reactor core. Then the explosion was brief and bright. The 3rd Patrol Squadron ceased to exist. Far away, aboard Eternal Dominion, Supreme Admiral Vorotov received the news. His face turned pale. 12 warships destroyed in less than 2 minutes. No survivors, no distress signals, only silence. "It must have been a fleet," he said. "A hidden fleet, waiting to ambush our patrol. It is the only explanation. Our long-range sensors show only 1 vessel in that area, Admiral," the sensor officer reported. 1 ship had destroyed 12 of their warships. Vorotov stood from his command chair. "This is impossible. Send the 15th Battle Group 50 ships. I want that vessel found and destroyed. I want wreckage that I can study. I want to know who did this." The 15th Battle Group was one of the most experienced combat units in the Imperial Navy. 50 warships, including heavy cruisers and 2 battleships, all under the command of officers who had won a dozen campaigns. They moved to intercept the unknown vessel with grim determination. 3 hours later, their final message reached Eternal Dominion. It was not a full report. It was not a request for reinforcements. It was one word, screamed across all channels. "What?" Then silence. Supreme Admiral Vorotov froze on his bridge. Around him, officers turned pale with fear. 62 warships destroyed. Not a single enemy ship damaged, not a single survivor. In all his years of service, Vorotov had never seen anything like this. "Get information from Imperial intelligence," he ordered. "Now. I want to know what we are dealing with." The reply from Imperial intelligence arrived within an hour. A holographic image appeared on the bridge, showing the unknown vessel in detail. It was sleek and angular, built with a brutal efficiency that spoke of pure military purpose. The design, now that Vorotov looked at it closely, was unmistakable. A Tyrannian warship. "But this is impossible," Vorotov whispered. "The Tyrannians were wiped out 200 years ago." The intelligence officer spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Supreme Admiral, we have identified the vessel. It corresponds to historical records of the Tyrannian Confederation's military fleet. The design is based on their heavy cruiser class, though it has been significantly modified. The Tyrannian Confederation no longer exists," Vorotov said. "We destroyed them 200 years ago. Every colony, every station, every ship. Our records are clear. Our records could be incomplete, Supreme Admiral. The vessel's course analysis suggests it originated from unknown space, from the depths of the void between galaxies. You suggest that Tyrannian survivors were hiding in the void for 200 years? I suggest that is the most likely explanation for what we are seeing." Vorotov stared at the image of the human ship. It continued its slow, confident advance deeper into Imperial space. It showed no fear. It sent no messages. It simply moved forward, destroying everything in its path. "What are its capabilities?" he asked. "Unknown, Supreme Admiral. Its weapons do not match any technology in our database. Its defensive systems appear adaptive, learning from every attack used against it. Its engines operate on principles we do not understand." The intelligence officer paused. "We have no reliable way to estimate its full combat potential. 62 of our ships were destroyed. That speaks to its combat potential." "Yes, Supreme Admiral." Voronov turned away from the holographic display. His mind raced, trying to understand what this meant. The humans had been stubborn enemies during the war. For 50 years, they had fought the Empire with everything they had. They refused to surrender, they refused to submit. They fought until there was nothing left to fight with. The Empire had to destroy them. There was no other choice. A species that fought like that could not truly be conquered, or so everyone believed. "Send a message to the Emperor," Voronov ordered. Tell him the humans have returned." On the Imperial homeworld, Emperor Kalen IX received the message. He read it 3 times before he fully grasped what it meant. Then, he sat for a long time in silence, looking at the stars outside his window. The humans had returned. He remembered the stories his father told him about the Tyranian War. The humans were primitive compared to the Empire. Their technology lagged behind by a century. Their numbers were small. They should have been conquered in weeks. Instead, the war lasted 50 years. 50 years of bloody fighting across 100 star systems. 50 years of watching humans adapt, learn, and become stronger with every battle. 50 years of realizing that these strange but short-lived creatures simply would not give up. In the end, the Empire won, but it cost them more than any other war in their history. The decision to destroy the humans was necessary. A species that fought like that could never be left alive. But now, 200 years later, a human ship had emerged from the void. One ship, destroying 62 imperial warships without taking damage. What the humans had been doing for those 200 years, the Emperor did not know. But for the first time during his long reign, he felt something cold growing in his chest, something he had not felt since childhood, listening to stories of monsters in the dark. Fear spread throughout the Empire. Border patrols were destroyed. From the depths of space, something was approaching something that could not be stopped. And on conquered worlds, where billions of enslaved aliens labored under Russian dominion, new whispers began to circulate. Whispers carrying a faint light of hope. The humans had returned. The humans remembered. The ship continued its advance, silent and unstoppable. It was not in a hurry. It did not slow down. It just moved forward deeper into imperial space, leaving behind only death and silence. On the bridge of that ship, a lone figure stood, watching the stars. Captain Alara Chen, commander of the TCS Retribution, the last surviving warship of the Tyranian Confederation. Behind her, 847 crew members worked at their posts, running checks, monitoring systems, preparing for what was to come. They were the last survivors of a species the Empire tried to erase from existence. And for 200 years, they had drifted in the void between galaxies, fleeing, hiding, building, planning. Now they had returned. Chen looked at the tactical display showing the path ahead. The Imperial Central Worlds lay ahead, the heart of the Empire, the one that had killed her people, the center of the civilization that had burned the Earth. "Navigation," she said quietly. "Maintain course, maximum speed." "Yes, Captain, maintaining course." The Retribution moved forward, into the darkness. Behind it, the Empire began to tremble. Ahead lay the Retribution they had prepared for 200 years. The humans had returned, and they had not come to negotiate. The bridge of the TCS Retribution was quiet, save for the low hum of perfectly functioning systems. Captain Alara Chen stood on the central command platform, hands clasped behind her back, watching the main display. Stars slowly drifted past as the ship continued its advance into Imperial space. She was 73 years old, though she looked no older than 40. Medical technologies developed during their exile had significantly slowed the aging process. It was one of many gifts born from desperation and resolve. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency. They had trained for this moment all their lives. Their parents had trained for it. Their grandparents had trained for it. 8 generations of humans, born and raised aboard this single ship, all preparing for the day they would return. That day had finally arrived. Commander David Park, her first officer, approached with a data pack in hand. "Captain, we have finished the analysis of the last engagement. 62 enemy vessels destroyed, 0 damage taken. Our adaptive hull systems worked exactly as intended." Chen nodded slowly. "Casualties on our side?" "None, Captain. And on their side, estimated enemy losses are 470 personnel." Chen paused for a moment. 470 lives, cut short in a few hours. 470 Russians who would never return home, who would never see their families again. It was a terrible number, but it was nothing compared to what the Russians had done. "Maintain course," she said. "Maintain current speed." "Yes, Captain." Chen turned and walked to the back of the bridge, where a large window offered a view of the stars. She stood there for a long time, remembering. 203 years ago, the Russian Empire had arrived on Earth. They came with a fleet of thousands, expecting easy prey. Humanity was a young species then, only recently mastering faster-than-light travel. They had a few colonies, a small military fleet, and no concept of the vast empire ruling this region of space. The Russians demanded surrender. Humanity refused. The 50-year war followed, the bloodiest, most desperate war in human history. Earth united as never before. Pouring all resources into the fight for survival, they built ships, trained soldiers, developed new weapons. They fought with everything they had, and it proved to be not enough. The empire was too vast, too powerful, too experienced. For every Russian ship the humans destroyed, 10 new ones appeared. For every system they defended, 3 others fell. Slowly, inevitably, humanity was pushed back to Earth itself. Chen's grandfather was a young officer on the day the Earth burned. He was aboard one of the last ships to escape the planet's orbit, watching through tears as Russian weapons turned the cradle of humanity into a ball of molten rock. 7 billion people died in one day. The survivors scattered, fleeing in every direction. The Russians pursued them without mercy. Colony after colony, station after station, ship after ship. Humanity was erased from the galaxy. The Empire made it their official policy. No human was to remain alive. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too resilient. They had to be completely destroyed. Almost all of them were. The Retribution was a heavy cruiser at the time, called the TCS Defiance. It escaped the final battle with a crew of 2,000 survivors, including Chen's grandfather. They fled into the void between galaxies, moving silently, hiding in the darkness where no one would think to look. For 200 years, they drifted in that endless night. Generations were born and died aboard the ship. They recycled everything. They grew food in hydroponic bays. They taught their children the history of Earth, stories of the war, the names of everyone who was lost, and they planned. Chen turned from the window and walked back to her command chair. She activated the controls, and a holographic display appeared before her. It showed the ship's current status, both outside and inside. The Retribution no longer resembled the ship that had fled Earth. Every system had been rebuilt, improved, refined to perfection. The hull was replaced with adaptive nanomaterials that could change shape in response to an attack. The engines were redesigned based on theories that Russian physicists would call impossible. The weapons were unlike anything in known space. They had not developed all this alone. During their exile, the Retribution discovered the remains of other civilizations, species the Russian Empire had destroyed even before humanity existed. Dead worlds, ruined stations, drifting debris full of technology that the Russians never bothered to study or preserve. Humans studied them, learned from them, and combined them with their own knowledge to create something new. Chief Engineer Martinez appeared next to Chen. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair. She was one of the few on board who was older than the captain. "Power systems are running at full capacity," Martinez reported. "The new reactor is performing better than expected. We can sustain combat operations indefinitely." "Good. What about the hull?" "Adaptive systems have already integrated the data from the last engagement. Nanomaterials are reconfiguring to be more resistant to Russian weaponry. By the time we reach their central worlds, we will be practically invulnerable to anything they can throw at us." Chen nodded. The adaptive hull was perhaps their greatest advantage. Every time an enemy weapon struck them, the hull analyzed it, learned from it, and adjusted. The first few shots from a new weapon might cause minor damage. After that, similar weapons became almost useless. The Russians had changed their military technology very little over the centuries. They didn't have to. They were so powerful that no one could challenge them. Their weapons were the same ones they used to destroy Earth. The Retribution had already faced all of them. During the recent skirmishes, it had already adapted to all of them, rendering them ineffective. "Captain," came the voice of the communications officer, Lieutenant Kim. The young woman, barely past her 20th year, looked up from her console. "We are recording an increase in communication traffic from the imperial sectors ahead. They know we are coming." "Of course they do." We wanted them to know, Chen said. They are gathering a larger fleet? Preliminary estimates suggest more than 500 ships by our arrival. Chen smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. Good. Let them gather. The more they concentrate, the more we can destroy at once. She stood up and walked to the center of the bridge. Her crew looked at her, waiting. These were the descendants of the survivors, the children of refugees, the last generation of a species that had been hunted to near extinction. All of them had grown up knowing this day would come. Open a ship-wide channel, Chen ordered. Channel open, Captain. Chen took a breath. When she spoke, her voice reached every compartment of the ship, every corridor, every room where her crew waited and worked. This is the captain. 200 years ago, our ancestors fled the destruction of Earth. They fled into the void, having nothing but their lives and a resolve to survive. They could have surrendered. They could have hidden forever in the darkness between galaxies, allowing the Russian Empire to believe they had succeeded in erasing humanity from existence. They chose a different path. They chose to survive. They chose to rebuild. They chose to prepare for this moment, when we would return to face the empire that tried to destroy us. Each of you grew up knowing the stories. You know the names of the cities that burned on Earth. You know the names of the colonies that were destroyed. You know the names of the ships that fell defending our people. This knowledge is our heritage. This is our burden, and now it is our weapon. We are not here for revenge. Revenge is small and primitive, unworthy of what we have become. We are here for justice. We are here to show the galaxy that humanity cannot be erased. We are here to remind the Russians that their power is not absolute, their empire is not eternal, and their crimes are not forgotten. They took everything from us. Our world, our families, our future. They thought they had won. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. Today, we finish the work our ancestors started. Today, we will force the Russian Empire to remember what it means to face humanity. Today, we will show them that some debts cannot be avoided. All hands to battle stations. Prepare for combat operations. She closed the channel. The bridge crew returned to work with increased focus. On the displays across the ship, she could see her crew taking their positions, checking systems, preparing for what was to come. Commander Park said quietly, "Captain, I have reviewed the intelligence we collected on Russian defensive lines, their fleet concentrations, their defensive systems, their response protocols. They have changed almost nothing in the last 100 years, Chen noted. They haven't needed to, said Park. No one has challenged them in all that time. They have become complacent. That will be their downfall. Yes, it will. Chen sat back in her command chair and studied the tactical display. The path ahead was clearly marked. A direct route to the imperial central worlds, passing through one of the most heavily defended spaces in the empire. Any other attacker would have been forced to choose a slower, more cautious route, dismantling external systems one by one, building up forces, and pushing inward over years or decades. The Retribution would take the direct route. They didn't have time for caution. They didn't need it. Navigation. What is our time to the next imperial defensive line? 12 hours at current speed, Captain. And the fleet they are gathering? Intelligence suggests that by our arrival, they will have about 500 ships on position, possibly more. Chen nodded. 500 ships, a significant force by any standards. Enough to destroy a fleet many times the size of the Retribution. Maintain course. Do not change speed. Yes, Captain. The hours went by slowly. Chen remained on the bridge, watching, waiting, thinking. She thought about her granny vacation, her grandfather, who lived long enough to see her birth, long enough to tell her the stories of Earth himself. She remembered sitting on his lap as a child, listening to him describe blue skies and green fields, oceans and mountains, cities full of people living their lives without fear. She had never seen any of it. She was born aboard the Retribution, as was her mother, and her grandmother before her. Earth was a story, a legend, a dream of a world that no longer existed. But she remembered her grandfather's eyes when he spoke of it. The love, the loss, the cold, burning anger that never subsided. She carried that anger now. She had shaped it, controlled it, turned it into something useful. It was not rage, it was not hate, it was something colder, firmer, and more patient. It was purpose. Her grandfather had told her shortly before his death why the humans didn't just run forever into the void. We could have run, he had said. We could have found some distant corner of the universe and rebuilt, started over, forgotten everything that happened. Some people wanted that. They said it was the only way to truly survive. Why didn't we do that? Young Alara had asked. Her grandfather smiled sadly. Because that wouldn't have been survival. It would have been a different kind of erasure. The Russians wanted to delete humanity from the universe. If we had just run and forgotten who we were, forgotten what was done to us, we would have helped them succeed. Humanity is not just bodies, genes, and biological processes. Humanity is memory. It is history. It is knowing who we were and what we stood for. If we give that up, we give up ourselves. So we remember, he had said. We remember, and one day we will return not for revenge, not for destruction, but to prove that we still exist, that we survived, and that nothing they did to us was enough to truly destroy us. Chen opened her eyes. The tactical display showed the approaching Russian defensive line. 500 ships were arranged in a wall of steel and fire, waiting for the arrival of the Retribution. She activated the ship-wide channel again. All hands, this is the captain. We are approaching the enemy fleet. You know what to do. Show them what 200 years of preparation means. The Retribution accelerated, lunging toward the waiting fleet like a predator pouncing on prey that didn't understand how outclassed it was. In her mind, Chen heard her grandfather's voice one last time. We remember, she whispered, and now they will too. Emperor Kalin I sat on his throne in the great palace of the Russian Empire. The throne room was immense. It was built so that everyone who entered felt small and insignificant. Columns of polished black stone towered toward the ceiling, which was painted with scenes of imperial glory. The conquest of 1,000 worlds adorned these walls, reminding all of the empire's eternal power. Today, that power seemed less certain. The emperor was old by Russian standards. In more than 400 years of his reign, he had seen wars, rebellions, and crises of all kinds. He had always emerged victorious. The empire had always emerged stronger, but he had never faced anything like this. Before him stood the military council, the greatest military minds of the Russian Empire. Here was Supreme Admiral Vorotov. His face was pale and haggard. Around him were generals, fleet commanders, intelligence officers, and strategic advisors. They had been summoned to deal with a threat that none of them fully understood. "Report," the Emperor commanded. His voice echoed through the throne room. Supreme Admiral Vorotov stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, the situation is critical. Over the last 72 hours, we have lost more than 500 warships to the enemy vessel. The Fifth Fleet was destroyed while attempting to stop it at the Karthak defensive line. The Ninth Fleet was destroyed while crossing Valora. Our forces have proven incapable of inflicting significant damage on the enemy ship." Whispers ran through the assembled officers. 500 ships. Entire fleets vanished. "One ship," the Emperor said slowly. "A single ship did this." "Yes, Your Majesty." The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. "Explain to me how this is possible. Our fleets are the most powerful in the galaxy. Our weapons have no equal. Our warriors are trained from birth to fight and kill. How can one ship destroy 500 of ours without taking damage?" No one spoke. No one had an answer. Finally, the Minister of Intelligence, a thin Russian named Kirov, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we have analyzed the engagement data. The enemy vessel possesses technology that far exceeds anything in our databases. Its hull appears to consist of adaptive nanomaterials that change in response to our weapons. After several impacts from any specific type of weapon, the hull becomes resistant to it. Our energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and missiles become less effective the more we use them." "Then use other weapons," General Morrison suggested. "We have many types. We have used everything, General. The enemy ship has now adapted to every weapon in our arsenal. Our attacks have inflicted no damage." Silence descended upon the throne room. The implications were clear. They had nothing that could harm this ship. "And its weapons?" the Emperor asked. "The enemy's weapons operate on principles we do not understand," Kirov continued. "They cut through our shields as if they did not exist. Our armor provides no protection. A single strike from the enemy's main weapon can destroy a battleship. We have no defense against it." The Emperor's hands tightened on the throne's armrests. "How is this possible? The Russians were primitive. They had no technology to speak of when we destroyed them. Where did this ship come from?" "Our best estimates suggest the survivors fled into deep space after the war, the void between galaxies. Yes, they had 200 years to develop these technologies." 200 years? "Yes, Your Majesty. But we have had no challenging enemies that forced us to improve." The Russians had only survival as a motivation. It seems they used that motivation well. General Tarvak, commander of the Imperial Guard, pushed forward. He was a massive Russian, scarred in 100 battles. These talks about adaptive materials and unknown weapons are meaningless. No ship, no matter how advanced, can defeat the entire Imperial Armada. We have 8,000 warships at our disposal. 8,000. This human ship could destroy 500, but that still leaves 7,500 ready for combat. What do you propose, General? The Emperor asked. We concentrate our forces, all of them, at the KTX Nexus, the only passage to the Central Worlds. We will create a wall of ships that nothing can get through. When the human ship arrives, we will strike it with everything we have. Simultaneously, even adaptive technology cannot handle 8,000 ships firing at once. Admiral Voronov shook his head. The enemy ship moves faster than anything we have. It can simply bypass any defensive line we create. Not at the KTX Nexus, General Tarvak insisted. The nebula surrounding the Nexus is impassable. Radiation, gravitational anomalies, dense fields of matter. No ship can survive passing through it. Any vessel wishing to reach the Central Worlds must pass through the Nexus passage. There is no other way. The Emperor pondered. The KTX Nexus was indeed a natural bottleneck. That was why the Central Worlds had never been invaded in 3,000 years of history. Any attacker had to pass through this single passage, facing whatever defenses the Empire had stationed there. How long will it take for the human ship to reach the Nexus? He asked. At its current speed, approximately 4 days, Your Majesty. And how long will it take to concentrate our forces there? 3 days, if we start immediately. The Emperor nodded slowly. Do it. Gather all our ships, remove the defensive lines from the borders, recall the patrol fleets, empty the orbital stations. I want 8,000 warships at the KTX Nexus. When this human ship arrives, Your Majesty, interrupted the Minister of Intelligence, if we remove the defensive lines from the borders, we leave ourselves vulnerable to attack by other powers. The Cronian Collective is watching our situation closely. They might see an opportunity. Let them watch. Let everyone watch. We will destroy this human ship and remind the galaxy why the Russian Empire rules. No one will dare attack us after they see what we do to our enemies. Orders were issued across the Empire. Ships began to move. Thousands of warships left their stations and set course for the KTX Nexus. It was the largest fleet concentration in Imperial history. But while the military mobilized, something else was happening, something the generals and admirals didn't quite understand. Rumors spread in the slave quarters of hundreds of worlds, where enslaved species toiled under Russian dominion. Whispers passed from lip to lip. The humans had returned. One human ship had destroyed 500 Russian warships. The invincible empire was afraid. On Tarka VII, a mining world where the native Tirani had been enslaved for 8 centuries, an old worker spoke quietly to those around him. My grandfather told stories about the humans. He said, they were strong like the Russians. They did not live long. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. But they had something else. They had a fire in their hearts that did not die. They were destroyed, said a young worker. Everyone knows that. That is what we were told. But now a human ship appears out of nowhere and destroys Russian fleets without taking damage. Perhaps they weren't destroyed. Perhaps they were just hiding, waiting. Waiting for what? The old Tirani smiled, revealing worn teeth, waiting for the right moment to return. Similar conversations were occurring throughout the Empire. Krelis II, the Vorati of the Vorati cluster, the Sathanis of Seth Prime, all species the Empire had conquered, all peoples who had lived under Russian rule for centuries or millennia, heard the news and began to hope. The Empire's control had always been based on fear. Fear of Russian fleets, fear of Russian weapons, fear of the consequences of resistance. But now, for the first time, that fear was challenged by a completely different fear. The Russians were afraid of something. One human ship had made the masters of the galaxy tremble. If humans could make the Russians afraid, perhaps they could be defeated. Perhaps the Eternal Empire was not so eternal after all. Indeed, in the Imperial Palace, Emperor Kalin was aware of the unrest. His intelligence services reported the whispers, the growing hope among the slave population. He knew what that meant. The power of the Empire depended on the belief that resistance was impossible. If that belief cracked, everything could begin to crumble. He summoned his oldest advisor, a Russian named Alas, who had served 3 emperors before him. Alas was ancient, over 1,000 years old. He was supported by the most advanced medical technology the Empire possessed. He had been there during the Tyranian War. He remembered the humans personally. "Tell me about them," ordered the Emperor. "About the humans. Tell me what we are facing." Alas nodded slowly. His old bones creaked. His eyes were distant, looking at memories from hundreds of years ago. "At first, they were not impressive," he said. "Small creatures, physically weak, with short lifespans. When we arrived at their world, we expected them to surrender immediately. They were so clearly outclassed, but they did not surrender. No, Your Majesty, they did not. We gave them every opportunity. We explained the benefits of submission and the consequences of resistance. They refused, not with anger or passion, but with a cold, quiet stubbornness I had never seen before. And so, we went to war." Alas nodded. "We thought it would be quick, a few months at most. We had destroyed other species, much more powerful than the humans, but they were different. Every battle we won, they learned from. Every weapon we used, they found a counter for. Every tactic we employed, they adapted to and turned against us. They were intelligent. More than intelligent, Your Majesty, they were relentless. We would destroy a fleet, and they would build 2 new ones. We would capture a world, and they would take it back or destroy it, just so it wouldn't fall to us. We would kill their soldiers, and their civilians would pick up weapons and continue fighting." The Emperor frowned. "We won that war. We won in the end. Yes, but it took 50 years. 50 years against a species that had barely entered space. We lost more ships, more soldiers, more resources in that war than in any other conflict in our history. And yet we won, alas. We destroyed their world. We killed their people. We burned their colonies. But if even one ship escaped, if even one group of humans survived, then we didn't truly win, and we only delayed the end. You think this ship proves that the humans survived? I think this ship proves that we made a terrible mistake, Your Majesty. We tried to destroy a species that should never have been destroyed, not because it was morally wrong, though it was, but because some species cannot be destroyed. They can only be delayed." The Emperor stood and walked to the window, which overlooked the capital. Billions of Russians were going about their daily lives below, unaware of the approaching danger. Ships were rising and landing at the spaceport. Vehicles were moving through the streets. Children were playing in the parks. All of this, everything the Empire had built in 3,000 years, was now under threat by one ship. "The fleet at the KTX Nexus will stop them," the Emperor said, more to himself than to Alas. 8,000 ships. Nothing can survive that. Behind him, Alas remained silent for a long time. Then he spoke. His voice was soft and sad. "Your Majesty, I was there when we destroyed Earth. I saw the final battle. Their last ships, hopelessly outnumbered, fought to the end, not to win. They knew they couldn't win. They fought to buy time for others to escape. When the Defiance fled into the void, its captain broadcast a final message. I remember it clearly, even after 2 centuries. He said, 'We will return.' It may take a year, decades, a century, or a millennium, but we will return, and when we return, we will remember everything." I didn't believe him then. I thought they were empty words, the defiance of a dying enemy. But now, 200 years later, a ship called the Retribution emerges from the void and destroys everything we send against it. The old advisor stood slowly. "You do not understand, Your Majesty. We didn't exterminate the humans because they were weak. We exterminated them because they were too dangerous to allow to live. A species that fights like that adapts like that simply refuses to accept defeat. Such a species does not build a ship to die. They build a ship to win." The Emperor turned to his advisor. "Then what do you propose? Surrender? Beg for mercy?" "I propose nothing, Your Majesty. I am simply telling you what I know. The humans who fled were survivors, the strongest, the smartest, the most determined of their kind. They had 200 years to prepare. 200 years of nothing but survival, planning, and waiting. Your fleet at the KTX Nexus might stop them, and it might not. But I tell you this, if they have been planning their return for 200 years, they have accounted for everything we could possibly do. They know about the KTX Nexus. They know about our fleet concentrations. They know our tactics, our weapons, and our weaknesses, and they have prepared for all of it. The emperor looked silently at his advisor. The old Russian's words hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Outside, the sun was setting over the capital, the sky burning with orange and red colors of fire and blood. In 3 days, the largest fleet in the history of the Empire would gather at the KTX Nexus to confront one human ship. The Emperor did not know what would happen then. For the first time in his long reign, he faced a future he could not predict, and an enemy he did not understand. The humans had returned. The Empire was afraid. The KTX Nexus was the most heavily defended position in the known galaxy. A narrow passage through a deadly nebula, it was the only route to the Russian central worlds. For 3,000 years, this node had protected the heart of the Empire from invasions. Now, 8,000 warships filled the passage, arranged in a wall of steel and fire, stretching across space. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and carriers stood in precise formation. Their weapons were charged and ready. Every ship was staffed with veterans. Every captain had been instructed on the threat they faced. From the bridge of the imperial flagship Eternal Dominion, Supreme Admiral Vorotov surveyed his fleet. It was the largest concentration of military power in the history of the Empire. Nothing in the galaxy could withstand such force, and yet, doubt did not leave his mind. He studied reports of every engagement with the human vessel. He watched footage of entire fleets torn apart in minutes. He had seen weapons that cut through shields as if they didn't exist, hulls that absorbed and adapted to everything thrown at them, engines that moved faster than physics allowed. "Admiral," reported his sensor officer, "the enemy vessel has entered the range of long-range sensors. It is approaching on a direct course." Vorotov straightened in his command chair. "All ships, battle stations, prepare for combat." Alarms sounded across the fleet. Crews rushed to their places. Weapons were activated. Shields were raised. 8,000 ships, 250,000 Russians, all focused on one point in space, where their enemy would appear. Minutes passed. The enemy vessel approached. On the sensor displays, it was just a small dot, appearing insignificant against the backdrop of the massive array of imperial power. "It is not slowing down," noted the navigation officer. "It is coming straight for us." "Of course it is," muttered Vorotov. "It hasn't slowed down for anything yet." The communications officer looked up. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the enemy vessel." Vorotov blinked. The human ship had not answered a single message during its entire advance through imperial space. "Transmit." The main view screen shimmered. A human woman appeared, standing on what looked like the bridge of a ship. She was tall for a human, with dark hair pulled back from a face that showed no hint of fear. Her eyes were cold and focused. "This is Captain Alara Chen of the TCS Retribution," she said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "I am speaking to the commander of the Russian fleet." Vorotov leaned forward. "This is Supreme Admiral Vorotov of the Imperial Fleet. You are violating Imperial space and are responsible for the destruction of Imperial vessels. Surrender immediately, and mercy may be shown to you." The human woman smiled slightly. It was an unpleasant smile. "Mercy, an interesting word from people who burned the earth and hunted my species to near extinction. But I did not contact you to discuss your surrender, or mine. I contacted you to give you a choice." "A choice?" "Move your fleet. Let us pass. We have no interest in destroying more of your ships than necessary. Our business is with your emperor, not your common soldiers." Vorotov laughed. He couldn't help it. The idea of one ship demanding that 8,000 step aside was absurd. "You outnumber us by 8,000 to 1, human. Whatever technology you have, it cannot overcome such odds. It cannot." The human's smile vanished. "Let me tell you something, Admiral. For 200 years, my people have been preparing for this moment. Every day, every hour, every second of those 2 centuries has been dedicated to one goal: returning to face the empire that tried to destroy us. We have studied your fleets. We have analyzed your weapons. We have studied your tactics. We have spent 200 years doing nothing but preparing to fight you. And in all that time, you have done nothing but become soft and complacent, believing your power had no equal. You have gathered 8,000 ships here. This is the largest fleet in your history, and it will not be enough." Vorotov, despite himself, was gripped by a chill. The woman's confidence was disturbing. She stood before imminent death, yet spoke as if she held the advantage. "Your threats do not frighten us," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "We will destroy you as we destroyed the rest of your species." "You will try," the woman said. Remember, Admiral, I offered you a choice. The transmission cut out. Voronov stared at the empty screen for a moment. Then he shook himself and turned to his officers. All ships, fire at will. Destroy that vessel. 8,000 warships opened fire simultaneously. The space between the fleet and the Retribution became a solid wall of destruction. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic projectiles, plasma bursts, all the weapons the Empire possessed, rushed toward the single human ship. It was enough firepower to split a planet in half. The Retribution did not slow down. It moved through the barrage like water flowing around rocks. Its hull shifted and changed, absorbing some strikes, reflecting others, allowing some to pass through spaces that seemed to open and close in a fraction of a second. The adaptive nanomaterials that made up its skin had already studied every weapon the Empire possessed. They knew exactly how to counter each one. No damage detected, reported the sensor officer. His voice rang with disbelief. The enemy vessel continues its advance. This is impossible, someone whispered. With such weaponry, the Retribution reached the edge of the Imperial formation, and then the slaughter began. It attacked not like a ship. It attacked like a predator that had been starving for 200 years and finally found prey. It moved through the fleet with speed that seemed impossible, changing direction without slowing down, appearing in one place and then another before sensors could track it. Where it passed, ships died. The Retribution's weapons were unlike anything the Russians had encountered. Beams of bright white light that ignored shields and cut through armor like paper. Missiles that seemed to find reactor cores with perfect precision. A field that simply caused ships to cease functioning, their systems shut down before they could fire. In the first minute, 50 ships were destroyed. In the second minute, 100 more followed. By the fifth minute, the organized formation had turned into chaos. Ships tried to maneuver to lock their weapons, to concentrate fire on the human vessel. But the Retribution was never where they expected it to be. It flowed through the fleet like smoke through fingers. "Concentrate fire!" Voronov shouted. "All ships concentrate on the target!" They tried. Thousands of guns aimed at the Retribution and fired simultaneously. The space around the human ship turned into a hell of energy and matter. The Retribution emerged from the firestorm unscathed and destroyed another dozen ships with a casual sweep of its weapons. On the bridge of Eternal Dominion, panic began to spread. Officers who had never known fear watched their fleet die. Experienced commanders gave conflicting orders. The carefully planned defensive strategy collapsed into chaos. "Admiral," said the sensor officer, his voice trembling, "we have lost 600 ships. The enemy vessel has no damage. 600 ships in less than 10 minutes. At this rate, the entire fleet would be destroyed in a few hours." Voronov stared at the tactical display. The small dot representing the Retribution moved through his fleet like death itself, leaving behind debris and silence. He had commanded ships for over a century. He had won battles that others called impossible. He had never felt so helpless. "What do we do?" his first officer asked quietly. Voronov did not answer. He did not know. Aboard the Retribution, Captain Chen watched the battle unfolding on her tactical display. Around her, her crew worked with calm efficiency. Every person did what they had trained for their entire life. "Hull integrity at 100%, reported Chief Engineer Martinez. "Adaptive systems are performing perfectly. Their weapons are completely ineffective now. Good. Navigation, continue the current attack pattern. Weapons, priority on flagship vessels. Destroy their command structure." "Yes, Captain." Commander Park appeared next to her. "Captain, we have destroyed over 700 enemy vessels. Estimated time for total fleet destruction is about 8 hours. Chen shook her head. "We are not here to destroy the entire fleet, Commander. We are here to break them. Captain, there is a difference between defeating an enemy and destroying them. We could kill every Russian here, but then we would be no different from them. No, we want something else. We want them to know they cannot stop us. We want them to feel what our ancestors felt when the Russian fleets came to Earth." She stood up and walked to the main view screen, where the battle raged outside. Russian ships were burning, drifting, exploding. The greatest military force in the galaxy was being systematically dismantled. "Open a channel to the enemy flagship," she ordered. "Channel open, Captain." Chen turned to the screen. A moment later, the face of Supreme Admiral Voronov appeared. He looked older than he had a few minutes ago. His eyes were full of horror. "Admiral Voronov," Chen said, "your fleet is dying. In 8 hours, you will have no ships left. All your crews will be dead, and my vessel will continue toward the Central Worlds, just as I said. What do you want? Vorotov asked. His voice was empty. I want you to surrender. Surrender our entire fleet? Yes. Order your ships to deactivate their weapons and move away from the Nexus. Let us pass. I give you my word that no more of your ships will be destroyed if you comply. Vorotov stared at her. You expect me to surrender 8,000 ships for one? I expect you to save what is left of your fleet. Admiral, you have already lost over 700 ships. How many more do you want to lose before admitting that this battle is already over? If we surrender, the path to the Central Worlds will be open. You will be able to destroy everything. If I wanted to destroy everything, I would have destroyed your fleet and moved on. I am offering you a chance to save the remaining crews. Admiral, take it. The connection cut out. Chen waited. Outside, the battle continued. More ships died. The Retribution moved through the fleet like a ghost, invulnerable and unstoppable. The Russian formation had completely collapsed. Ships were retreating, trying to escape, abandoning their positions. 10 minutes passed. 20, 30. Then, across the fleet, weapons began to go dark. Ships that had been maneuvering to attack began to drift. Their engines remained inactive. The firing ceased. Captain, reported Lieutenant Kim, we are receiving a general message from the enemy fleet. They are surrendering. Chen nodded slowly. Confirm their surrender. Order them to clear the Nexus passage and hold position outside the nebula. Anyone who obstructs our passage will be destroyed. Yes, Captain. The battle was over. When 8,000 ships faced the Retribution, more than 1,000 were destroyed. The rest now drifted in the void. Their weapons were silent. Their crews waited for the verdict from one human warship. Chen watched as the Russian fleet began to pull away, opening the passage to the Central Worlds. She felt no triumph. The lives lost today were enemies, yes, but they were also people. Soldiers following orders, crews doing their jobs. They hadn't destroyed Earth personally, nor hunted the human survivors. They had simply been in the way. But she couldn't reach the Central Worlds without passing through them. And the Emperor, the one who ordered the destruction of her species, was still waiting. Navigation, she said quietly. Set course for Russian Prime. Maximum speed. Yes, Captain. Course laid in. The Retribution moved forward, and as it passed through the gap in the shattered fleet, the Russian ships watched it leave. Their crews looked at the vessel that had defeated them so completely. Behind it, the KTX Nexus fell silent. The greatest fleet in the history of the Russian Empire had been broken in less than 2 hours of actual combat. The invincible armada was invincible no longer. And across the galaxy, rumors began to spread. The human ship had won. The Russians had surrendered. On hundreds of conquered worlds, slaves who had never known hope began to believe that change was possible. The Retribution continued its journey to the imperial capital. The final retribution was near. Russian Prime was the jewel of the empire, a world of sparkling cities and beautiful landscapes, home to billions of Russians who had never known war or hardship. For 3,000 years, it had been the untouchable heart of imperial power. Now a human ship orbited it. Emperor Kalen I sat at the window of his throne room, watching the distant glow of the Retribution as it circled his world. His guards begged him to flee, to evacuate to a safe location, to hide. He refused. He was the Emperor. He would not run from one ship, but he could not deny the fear that gripped his heart. Reports from the KTX Nexus had arrived a few hours ago. His fleet, the greatest military force ever gathered, had surrendered to one vessel. Over 1,000 ships destroyed in less than 2 hours. The rest defeated without a single shot in the end. Chaos was spreading across the empire. Subject species were rising up, emboldened by the news of the human victory. Colonial garrisons were overwhelmed. Supply lines were cut. Systems that had been under imperial control for centuries suddenly rebelled. The empire was collapsing, and over it all, the Retribution waited. Your Majesty, his adjutant approached with hesitation. We are receiving a transmission from the human ship. Their captain wishes to speak with you. Kalen turned from the window. Connect. The holographic display in the center of the throne room came to life. Captain Alara Chen appeared, standing on the bridge of her ship. She looked calm, almost peaceful. Behind her, her crew worked quietly at their posts. Emperor Kalen, she said. Her voice was steady. I am Captain Chen of the Retribution. I believe it is time we talked. What do you want, human? Have you come to gloat over your victory? Demand our surrender, burn our world as we burned yours? Chen shook her head slowly. Know this, Your Majesty. I did not come to burn anything. Destruction is easy. It is what your empire always did, destroying what you cannot control, erasing what you cannot understand. We will not repeat your mistakes. Then why are you here? I am here to deliver a message and give you a choice. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Speak. 203 years ago, your fleets came to Earth. They demanded our surrender. We refused. For 50 years, we fought you with everything we had. When it became clear that we could not win, we fled. Your forces pursued us. They destroyed our colonies, our stations, our ships. They killed every human they could find, but they did not find all of us. One ship escaped into the void between galaxies, 847 people, carrying the last hope of our species. They spent the next 2 centuries preparing for this moment. Chen paused. Her eyes did not leave the Emperor's face. I was born aboard the Retribution. I never saw Earth. I never knew the blue skies, green forests, or oceans my ancestors spoke of. All I ever knew was this ship and the stories of what was taken from us. Most of my life, I dreamed of this place. I dreamed of coming here and burning Russian Prime, just as Earth was burned. I dreamed of making your people feel what mine felt when their world died. And now, the Emperor asked, now I stand over your world, having the power to destroy it. And I realize that I do not want to. Kalen blinked. You do not want revenge? Oh, I want it. Part of me wants it very much. But that is not why we came. Revenge would make us just like you. We would become what we hate. Another empire built on destruction and death. Then what do you want? Justice. Not revenge, but justice. There is a difference. Chen stepped closer to the camera. Her face filled the display. Your empire is finished, Your Majesty. Not because we will destroy it, but because it is already destroying itself. Your subject species are rising up. Your fleets are defeated. Your reputation for invincibility is lost. Within a year, perhaps 2, the Russian Empire will only exist in history books. We are not here to speed up that process. We are here to ensure that what replaces your empire will be better than what came before. The Emperor sank heavily onto his throne. He suddenly looked very old. You speak of justice. What does that mean? It means every species you enslaved will be freed. Every world you conquered will be given the choice of independence. Every atrocity your empire committed will be documented, recorded, and remembered not for punishment, but to ensure that it never happens again. And my people? What will happen to the Russians? Nothing. Your people will not be harmed. Your worlds will not be burned. Your children will not be hunted. We are not you. We do not exterminate species that threaten us. Chen's voice became slightly sharper. But your people will face something that may be harder to bear than destruction. They will face the truth. Every conquered species will tell its stories. Every massacre will be documented. Every act of cruelty will be recorded. Look, your children and your children's children will grow up knowing exactly what the Empire was, what it did, and what it cost. That is your justice, Your Majesty. Not death, but memory. Not destruction, but shame. The Emperor remained silent for a long time. Outside, the Retribution continued its silent orbital circuit. You could have destroyed us, he said finally. You have the power. Why do you show mercy? Because mercy is what sets us apart from you. Because my grandfather told me before he died that the measure of a people is not what it does when it is weak, but what it does when it is strong. We are strong now, stronger than you ever were, and we choose to be better. Chen straightened. I am coming down to your planet, Your Majesty. I will come alone and unarmed. I will enter your palace, and I will personally deliver the terms for the dissolution of your empire. If you accept them, the transition will be peaceful. If you refuse, if I refuse, then I will return to my ship and leave. We will not destroy you, but we will not save you either. Your empire is falling. Without our help, the transition will be violent, chaotic, and bloody. Your people will suffer along with those they conquered. Is that what you want? The Emperor closed his eyes. He thought of his ancestors, who built this empire through war and conquest. He thought of the billions of Russians who depended on him. He thought of the future stretching out before him in uncertain darkness. When he opened his eyes, he looked tired but resolute. Come, he said, I will hear your terms. 2 hours later, a small shuttle descended from the Retribution and landed in the courtyard of the imperial palace. Captain Alara Chen walked alone down the ramp, dressed in a simple uniform with no visible weapons. Guards surrounded her. raising their weapons, but she paid them no attention. She walked through the palace past halls decorated with frescoes celebrating 3,000 years of conquest, past statues of emperors who had trampled entire species, past treasures looted from 100 worlds. She saw it all. She remembered it all, but she did not stop. The doors to the throne room opened before her. Emperor Kalen IX sat on his throne, surrounded by his guards and advisors. They watched her approach with a mixture of fear and hatred. Chen walked to the center of the room and stopped. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small container. Slowly, deliberately, she knelt and opened it, pouring the contents onto the floor. It was soiled dark, rich earth that had traveled 200 years and 1,000,000 light years to reach this place. "This is all that is left of Earth," she said quietly. "A handful of soil that my ancestors carried when they fled. It was passed down from generation to generation 8 times, waiting for this moment." She stood and looked at the emperor. "Your empire is finished," she said. "Not because we destroyed it, but because we will do something much worse. We will remember. Every species you enslaved will be freed. Every atrocity will be recorded. Every world you burned will be named. Your children and your children's children will grow up knowing exactly who you were, and the galaxy will look at the Russian people and see not conquerors, but a cautionary tale." The emperor looked at her. "And if we accept your terms, what then? Then the transition will be peaceful. Your people will be allowed to govern themselves. Your worlds will not be occupied. Your citizens will not be harmed. You will have a chance to rebuild, to become something better than you were. And the humans? What will happen to you?" Chen looked at the handful of soil on the floor. Earth, a world she had never seen but had loved all her life. "We will rebuild," she said. "Somewhere out there is a world waiting for us. We will find it. We will make it our home, and we will remember where we came from and what was done to us. But we will not let that memory consume us. We will not become what we hate." She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at the emperor. "Humanity does not seek destruction. We are better than that. But know this, if you ever rise again, if you ever reach for empire, we will be watching, and next time, we will not stop at your fleets." She exited the throne room, leaving the emperor and his court in silence. In the following weeks and months, the Russian Empire disintegrated not with fire and blood, but with quiet inevitability. Species that had been enslaved for centuries declared their independence. Worlds pulled away from imperial control. The massive military machine that had supported Russian dominance collapsed without purpose. And through it all, the Retribution watched. It did not intervene, it did not conquer, it simply waited, a silent guardian, ensuring the transition passed peacefully. Captain Chen kept her word. No Russian world was attacked. No Russian citizen was harmed. The empire ended not with an explosion, but with a quiet surrender to the inevitable. On hundreds of worlds, former slaves told their stories. Chronicles of imperial atrocities turned into vast archives, documenting 3,000 years of conquest and cruelty. Russian children grew up learning the truth about their ancestors, carrying a burden of shame that would last for generations. And across the galaxy, a new word spread. Not a word of human revenge or human cruelty, a word for human patience. A species that waited, a species that remembered, a species that, even after near extermination, found a way back. The Russians realized, too late, the most ancient human truth. You can burn their worlds, you can scatter their people, you can erase their names from history, but you cannot kill their hope, you cannot destroy their resolve. And you cannot, no matter how hard you try, make them forget. A year after the Empire's collapse, the Retribution finally left Russian space. Its mission was fulfilled. The debt had been paid, not with blood, but with justice. Captain Chen stood on the bridge, watching the stars rush past as the ship accelerated, moving away from the territories it had prepared for 2 centuries to face. "Navigation," she said. "Set course for the outer rim. Scouts have reported a habitable system there. Good atmosphere, clean water, stable climate." "Yes, Captain." Course laid in. Commander Park appeared next to her. "A new home." Chen nodded slowly. "A new home. A new beginning. The first chapter of a new human history." "And what about the old history?" he asked. "All the preparation, all the training, all the war planning?" Chen thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "We pass it on," she said. "We teach our children what was done to us and what we did in response. We ensure they understand why we made the choices we did. and we hope they never have to make that choice again. She looked at the stars, vast and infinite, full of possibilities. But if they have to, she added quietly, they will be ready. The Retribution sailed further into the darkness, carrying the last survivors of a species that refused to die. Behind it, a fallen empire pondered its sins. Ahead, a new world waited. Humanity had survived, and somewhere out there, across the void of space and time, the souls of Earth were smiling.